Turn the car around, I said, my voice cutting through the soft hum of the tires on the highway. Elaine glanced at me, startled, her hands tightening on the steering wheel. Mom, what she started, but I didn't let her finish. Now, please. Something in my tone must have told her this wasn't a suggestion. She flicked on the signal and eased off the interstate at the next exit without another word. The duffel sat in the back seat, small and ordinary against the gray upholstery, the kind of bag you'd take to the gym or fill with snacks for a weekend trip. It was Ryan's bag dropped off at our house the night before, with a casual just Milo's stuff for the weekend. I'd thought nothing of it then, but his call that morning, the stilted questions, the forced cheerfulness, and finally, the rare, tremulous "I love you," had cracked something open inside me. We rolled into a gas station lot, the bright lights glaring against the overcast sky. Elaine put the car in park and looked at me, pale. Mom, you're scaring me. What's going on? I didn't answer right away. My hands reached for the bag almost on their own, my fingers already unzipping it before my brain caught up. On top lay Milo's folded pajamas, a coloring book, a toy car. My heart clenched, familiar, innocent things. I pushed them aside. Beneath them, wrapped in clear plastic and sealed with dark tape, were rows of small packets. Dozens. I didn't need a label to know what they were. My breath caught, and for a moment, the world narrowed to the smell of gasoline, the buzz of the fluorescent lights, and the weight of what I held. I zipped the bag closed slowly, my hands steady now. Cold clarity spread through me, replacing the confusion and doubt of the past weeks. I turned to Elaine, who was watching me with wide eyes, and said quietly, "Drive back." As Elaine steered the car back toward Albany, the bag sat between us like a silent accusation. I stared out the window, but my mind wasn't on the road. It drifted back over the past 5 years, the slow slide from generosity into obligation, from helping to being used. When Ryan lost his job at the freight company, it felt natural to step in. Just until he's back on his feet, I told myself. Elaine was working part-time at a clinic juggling schedules with Milo's daycare. They were young, overwhelmed, and I couldn't stand by while my grandson went without. The first checks were small groceries, gas, a little help with rent when the landlord raised it. Then it was the car repair, the insurance lapse, the daycare deposit. Every time they promised to pay me back. Every time they swore it was temporary. I can still hear Ryan's voice on the phone, always cheerful, always just a little too quick. "You're a lifesaver, Larissa. We'll make this right soon." But soon never came. Instead, the calls grew more frequent, the amounts larger. At first, Elaine would call too, thanking me, sounding embarrassed. Over time, she stopped calling. Stopped. Thanking stopped meeting my eyes. There were signs I chose not to see. Ryan's business trips that didn't match his odd jobs. Elaine's guilty silences when I asked about their plans. I told myself they were stressed, that young families make mistakes. I told myself Milo needed stability, not a grandmother who asked too many questions. I sold my wedding set to help them with a down payment on a used car. I drained a small savings bond for their medical bills. Every time I said it was the last time. Every time I went back. I thought I was protecting my daughter, protecting my grandson. I never imagined they would hand me a bag full of poison and expect me to carry it across a border. The realization sat heavy in my chest as the highway signs blurred past, and I knew the next words out of my mouth would change everything. 2 months before that drive, I'd been sitting at my kitchen table with the phone pressed to my ear, listening to Ryan's smooth voice outline another request. This one was different, bigger, heavier. "It's the best school in the state, Larissa," he said, his words spilling over themselves like a sales pitch. "Small classes, anti-bullying programs, real opportunities for Milo. We just need $18,000 to cover the rest of this term, and the enrollment fees." Elaine's voice came on next, softer, but no less rehearsed. Mom, you know how miserable he is at that public school? We're worried about him every day. This could change everything. I pictured Milo's bright little face, the drawings he'd send me after weekends together, and my heart twisted. Still, something in their tone felt off, too polished, too expectant. I took a breath and said the words I'd never said to them before. I think we should slow down, meet with his teachers. First, see what's actually going on before making such a huge financial commitment. The silence on the other end stretched long enough for me to glance at the screen to make sure the call hadn't dropped. Finally, Ryan said flatly, "So you're saying no?" "I'm saying, let's explore other options first," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. But I already knew what my hesitation would cost me. Within a week, the change was obvious. The phone calls stopped. The invitations to Sunday dinners disappeared. Milo's drawings, once a steady stream of color and stickers arriving in my mailbox, stopped without explanation. Then one morning, Elaine sent a single-line message. "We'll figure things out ourselves." No warmth, no thank you, nothing of the daughter who once called me every evening for advice. It landed like a stone in my chest. For the first time in years, I was on the outside of their life looking in, and the view was colder than I'd ever imagined. It was in that silence that their plan for the cabin weekend began to take shape. Looking back now, I can see the pattern. At the time, the silence felt like punishment, but it wasn't. It was a staging ground. By the time Elaine called me again, weeks had passed without a real conversation. When her name lit up my phone, my heart jumped. I answered too quickly, eager to hear her voice. "Mom," she said brightly, almost too brightly. "We've been thinking. We need a break from all the stress. Ryan's cousin has a cabin near Montreal. It's beautiful this time of year, right on the water. We thought you could come. A long weekend together, just like old times." Her tone was casual, like the past 2 months hadn't happened. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe this was a chance to mend whatever had frayed between us. "That sounds lovely," I said, my chest loosening a little. "It would be so good to see you all." We settled on the details and I hung up, feeling a flicker of hope I hadn't felt in weeks. The night before the trip, Elaine came by alone, carrying a small duffel bag. "Just kids' stuff," she said lightly, setting it near the door. "Snacks, pajamas, you know." She kissed my cheek and left before I could say much. I remember standing there in the hallway, staring at that bag longer than I should have. The next morning, as we drove north with our SUV packed full, my phone rang. Ryan's voice came through. Too calm, too careful. "Hey, Larissa, just checking you've got that bag right. Everything made it into the car." "Yes, it's here," I said. "Good," he replied after a pause. "And you didn't need to open it or move anything, did you?" My fingers tightened on the phone. "No." "Why?" He gave a small laugh, but it sounded forced. "Just making sure. You know how important this trip is for us. What matters to you most? Larissa, just don't open that bag." I ended the call with my stomach turning as the highway stretched ahead toward the border. Elaine sat frozen behind the steering wheel, her knuckles white. The engine was still running, but the car had stopped breathing. I held the duffel bag in my lap. It was zipped again neat, like it had never been opened, but we both knew what was inside. "Elaine," I said softly, "did you know?" She didn't answer at first. Her eyes flickered to the rearview mirror, where Milo sat humming to himself, kicking his feet lightly. She swallowed hard. "I didn't pack the bag," she whispered, barely audible. "That's not what I asked." Her face crumpled. Tears welled up and threatened to spill, but still she said nothing. And that silence, that awful, charged silence, told me everything. She hadn't planned it, but she'd let it happen. I turned my gaze out the window. The gas station was quiet, a few cars fueling up, a breeze blowing discarded receipts across the pavement. I had never felt more alone in my life than sitting beside my daughter in that moment. I didn't know what to do, she said finally. He said it was safe. Just something he had to deliver. I didn't know it was. You knew enough not to ask, I said, calm but cold. You knew enough to stay quiet. I reached into my purse and pulled out my phone. I scrolled to the contact labeled Attorney M. Sager and hit call. He picked up on the second ring. Larissa. Everything all right? No, I said simply. I found something. In a bag my son-in-law asked me to carry across the border, small packages, wrapped, hidden under children's clothing. There was a pause. Do not open it again. Don't touch anything else. Just document everything. Photos if you can. I'll start a file. Thank you. I hung up and looked at Elaine. We're going home. She didn't argue. Didn't cry anymore. Just shifted the car into gear. Milo didn't notice the change. He was still humming, still smiling. And I sat in silence, wondering what kind of mother raises a daughter who chooses not to see. We didn't speak the whole ride back. Milo slept, for most of it, slumped against his window, his small fingers wrapped around a toy car. Elaine kept both hands on the wheel, her gaze locked on the road, her shoulders stiff. I sat in the passenger seat, the duffel bag at my feet, like it had teeth. When we pulled up in front of their house, I didn't wait. I got out, walked to the porch, and placed the bag right at the door. I didn't knock. The front door flew open. Ryan stood there, breathless, barefoot, like he'd been watching from the window. What are you doing? He asked. Voice high and sharp. We were supposed to. I turned slowly. You used my trust like a suitcase. His mouth opened, then closed again. He looked behind me at Elaine, who'd gotten out of the car and was standing next to it, arms crossed, but trembling. I don't know what you're talking about, he said too fast. It's just a bag. It's nothing. You're making this bigger than it. Stop, I said. Quiet, but with enough weight to make him flinch. Elaine stepped forward, but I held up a hand. No, don't defend him. Don't explain it away. She didn't speak, just looked down at the steps. I'm not calling the police, I said, turning back to Ryan. But I've documented everything. If anything like this happens again, if you even think about using me, I will not hesitate. He looked like he wanted to argue, but the words wouldn't come. Then I turned to Elaine. You still have a choice. But you'll make it without my money, without my name on your rent, your bills, your emergencies. She nodded, once tearfully, and I got back in the car. I didn't look in the mirror as I drove away. I didn't need to see their faces to know what I'd left behind. I sat at the kitchen table, coffee cooling beside me, and opened the notebook I hadn't touched in years. The one where I'd kept every receipt, every payment confirmation, every line item of support I'd handed over since Ryan lost his job. Car insurance, daycare fees, groceries, emergency dental work, rent when they were late. That time their heat was cut off in December. I traced each line with my pen like I was reading a history I hadn't meant to write. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just started crossing things out. First, the auto pay for their renter's insurance gone. Then the monthly transfer for Milo's school lunch fund canceled. The grocery card linked to my account disabled. The backup checking account I'd once opened in both our names just in case I called the bank and had my name removed, access revoked, cards frozen. No more safety nets. No more lifelines disguised as love. It wasn't revenge. I didn't even tell them. I just let the absence of money be my only message. Next came the will. I called my attorney and asked for an appointment that same week. He didn't ask questions when I told him I wanted to make amendments. He just said he'd have a fresh draft ready. No more shared beneficiaries. No more blind gifts handed down through habit. From now on, anything I left behind would be earned through presence, through integrity, not blood. I poured a second cup of coffee and stared out the window as the sun began to fade. The phone didn't ring. The house was quiet. Not even Elaine had tried to call since I left that bag on their porch. but I knew the silence wouldn't last. Something was coming, and when it did, I'd be ready. A week passed before the next ripple reached me. I was folding laundry when my phone buzzed. It was Maris Elaine's sister. We hadn't spoken in months. Her voice trembled before she even said hello. "Larissa," she whispered. "They're still going to Canada. They're doing it themselves now." I sat down slowly, the basket of clothes forgotten. "What do you mean? They told me they're leaving Milo with a friend for the weekend. Ryan said it's a business trip, but I saw the bag. The same one. Please do something." My stomach turned, but my voice stayed even. "Thank you for telling me, Maris." After we hung up, I opened my lawyer's number and pressed call. He answered on the first ring. "Sager." "They're going through with it," I said. "The same bag. Without me this time." He didn't hesitate. "We'll notify the authorities. You don't have to do a thing. Just stay out of it." "I'm not pressing charges," I said. "I want that clear." "I understand," he replied. "But if they're caught, that's on them." I ended the call and stared at the quiet kitchen. Milo's drawing from his last visit sat on the fridge, a crooked sun above a house he'd labeled Grandma's. My heart ached for him. That Saturday morning, the news came from Officer Martinez at Border Patrol. Ryan and Elaine had been arrested at dawn, trying to cross into Canada with illegal substances. They'd used their real names, their real IDs, the same bag tucked in their trunk. I thanked the officer, hung up, and sat at the table. The sound of the clock filled the house, steady and calm. I had not moved a finger to bring them down, yet everything I had feared had unfolded anyway. By afternoon, my phone rang again. This time, it wasn't Maris or a lawyer. It was a social worker from Child Services, and she was calling about Milo. The voice on the phone was gentle but formal. "Mrs. Vance, this is Child Protective Services. You're listed as the emergency guardian for Milo. We need you to come pick him up." I felt the room tilt slightly, but I steadied myself. Where is he now? At a temporary placement center. "He's frightened. I'll be there within the hour," I said. When I arrived, he was waiting with a small suitcase and his favorite stuffed fox tucked under his arm. His face lit up the moment he saw me, but then he faltered, unsure if he should run to me. I knelt down, arms open. He dropped the suitcase and clung to my neck. "Where's Mommy?" He whispered, his voice small against my shoulder. "They made a mistake," I told him, softly stroking his hair. "But you're safe now." He nodded, still clutching the fox. Together we left the building, and for the first time in weeks, I felt something solid beneath my feet. That night, I made up the guest room, smoothing the quilt as he unpacked his things. He lined up his toy cars on the windowsill, silent but calmer. By morning, I had already filled out the forms to enroll him in my local public school, the one where I'd once worked as a secretary. The principal remembered me and promised to help Milo adjust. Our days began to take on a rhythm. We ate breakfast together at the kitchen table. After school, he'd sit with me while I worked through bills, drawing pictures again, this time of us in the garden. I taught him chess on the same board I'd used with his mother when she was his age. On weekends, he helped me water the plants, his small hands steady on the hose. It wasn't instant, but slowly I watched the tension drain from his little body. His smile came back shy at first, then bright. His laugh filled the house in the evenings, like sunlight breaking through clouds. And as the sound of his footsteps echoed down the hallway at night, I began to prepare for what would come next. It took months, but I finally cleared out the spare room. Not just the furniture, but what it used to represent. I painted the walls a soft clay color and let Milo pick out a lamp shaped like a rocket ship. "This is our room now," he said one evening, crawling under the new blankets. "Yours and mine." I smiled and tucked him in. The letters started coming not long after the trial date was set. The first was from Ryan, handwritten, careful, filled with sorrow and explanations. He said he'd found faith in prison, that he'd made mistakes but never stopped loving us. He apologized for using me, said he wanted a fresh start. The next week came Elaine's. Hers was typed. Cold. She wrote about the pain of being separated from her child, the injustice of it all, how I'd turned the system against them. She didn't mention the duffel bag. I didn't respond to either. Instead, I placed each letter into a cardboard box at the top of my closet, labeled in thick black ink evidence. My lawyer says it's best to have everything documented. He's already building the case to secure full custody. I don't need to testify to their mistakes, just let their words speak for themselves. Milo doesn't ask about the letters. I don't mention them. What he cares about is that I'm there at pickup every afternoon, that dinner is warm, and that we read together every night. Lately, he's started reading the first lines himself, his finger following the words. Then he looks up, waiting for me to continue. I watch his eyes soften as the stories unfold. Stories with dragons, forests, adventures, but always a safe return home. He falls asleep quickly these days, curled on his side, his breathing steady. There are no bags left by the door, no secrets riding along in the back seat, no forced smiles or unspoken debts, just a quiet house, a safe child, and the slow, steady rhythm of rebuilding a life where trust no longer has to be tested.